That's the little GH. When I worked as a production potter in Minneapolis, you had to stamp your pots with the seal for the pottery, and you had to design your own so that they knew who made, if it was a lousy pot, they could tell it was Gwen's if it had a GH on it. So we had a little dowel rod and a Dremel tool, and we had to design it. I've used it ever since. It's just a GH for my initials. I was always grateful for that because I don't know that I would have. It's so quickly. You can just do it so quickly. Well, thanks for coming, you all. It's a beautiful fall day, and it's a sacrifice to come and sit in the theater and listen to someone talk, and I appreciate you all coming. I'm Gwen Heffner. I'm a potter, among other things, and this is sort of a slideshow of where I came from and where I am now. So here we go. This is the only slide that has words on it. I hate PowerPoints that you have to read, but anyway. My parents were musicians, and I came from a family that was really supportive of the arts. I think that's probably why I'm still an artist today. I think it's critical to have manners. We had horses. It was a big part of my life. It was pretty central to my early life. This is the lake that was in front of our house. That's me with an old-time musician. I forget his name. It was here at the Traditional Music Festival. We played together. I've always drawn. These are pretty funny. I couldn't find any early drawings except for these. These are pen and ink. My mother said I used to steal paper wherever I could find it because I started drawing when I was about 4 years old. And I only drew horses for about 10 years. I was obsessed with horses.
How old were you when you drew these?
These are actually, it says 92. I was in college. Was that? No, that was 72. I think I must have been in college or at high school. High school. Early high school. This is where I went to college. I was raised a Lutheran, and in order to get out of Ohio to go to school, I had to go to a Lutheran school. So I went to Luther College. It's a wonderful liberal arts school on just off the Mississippi River in that one part of Iowa that wasn't carved flat by the glacier. It's like Switzerland. It's a beautiful place. These are two pieces from my thesis show, and these were two prints I did. This was, again, horses. It's a woodblock print, and this was an etching of a monastery in Romania. When I was a junior at Luther, I was in their choir, I sang, and we were invited to Romania, and that was right up on the Russian border. I did a lot of imagery on the pots, and that was what my teacher, my undergraduate teacher was a student of someone who had gone through the Bauhaus. Her name was Marguerite Wildenheim. I don't think she's still alive. She came across, she was Jewish, so she had to run away from Germany, and she settled in California and has taught there ever since. Her line, her forms are real tight, they're real severe, and she decorated every single thing she ever made. So we were required to decorate. These were two from my thesis show. When I got out of college, I had an opportunity to go and apprentice with a printmaker in Tucson, Arizona. And I was basically too chicken to go that far away and try it. I didn't know the guy from Adam, but he had advertised for an apprentice and was accepted. So instead I went up to Minneapolis, which was closer and more familiar territory, and worked for a potter there named John Coiner. We were paid by the piece. These are, once again, lousy slides, but the mugs that are in this very, oh, I got clear. The mugs right there. You could get 22 on a board. I was paid 50 cents for every mug that I made, put a handle on, and decorated. So I knew if I got 22 finished on a board, I had $11. So I could usually make about 3 boards full in a day. And the ironic thing about it, when I went and got this job after the first 2 weeks, or the first week, I had all these mugs, you know, on these boards. And the owner came in and, you know, looked at them and he threw them in the scrap pile. All of them. And he turned to me and he said, "Learn to make handles." And I was like, oh, I didn't make any money. Oh, pardon my French. Is it okay if I talk like that? I'm sorry. I can't help it. It's in my DNA. But anyway, I was like, I didn't make any money. Oh no. So I would go into the studio at night after everybody's gone, and I had a bucket, and I would pull handles off this bucket until there's like 50 all around the bucket. I learned how to make handles. And the next week he took them. But these were goblets that I designed for him. I made $1 a piece for them. So I tried to make goblets whenever I could so I could make more money. But when I worked here, I was planning on working there a year, and I was looking to go to graduate school. 2 places I was considering was Ohio State and Bloomington. And I found a potter who'd gone to Bloomington. His wife had gone to Ohio State, and I visited him. And Christmas, And when I got back to Minneapolis after my Christmas break, I had a letter from him saying, would you like to come and be offer you a teaching assistantship at University of Louisville. I'd never been there. I didn't, you know, I knew Tom Marsh. I liked his pots. But I wrote him back and I said, that's really nice, but no. I really think I need to work this job a year. And after a year, if I can sit at the wheel, make pots and still like what I'm doing, then I think I can probably be a potter, but I need a year to know that. So at the end of the year, he wrote me again, and offered to me again. And this is how I got to Kentucky. I came here to go to graduate school. This is my mentor, Tom Marsh. That's a funny picture of me at the wheel in the studio. And this is one of the pieces from my thesis show. The quote of mine up there, making pottery is akin to the growth of all living things. It begins at the center and grows upward and outward, just as the seed bursts forth to become the flower. And that was a quote from my thesis show, and then the quote down below was from Tom when I had a retrospective show. But it's interesting that I talk about flowers because they're central to most of my work from then on, from most of my career. Well, after I got out of U of L, I worked as a graphic designer for a year and then took a job with the Arts Council. And these guys are great. They're from Pendleton County, and all these boys, I had these juniors, and they were the cutest. Guys, they'd never touched clay before. They'd never made art before. So we got in an empty studio. The Arts Council at that time was putting artists into the schools for a full year. You set up a studio and made pots, taught the classes they asked you to teach, and had the month of January off to make your own pots. You didn't have to teach 1 month out of the school year. Now these guys, we got there was nothing there but those shelves in the background. So I bought a circular saw and some tools with my money, and some glaze chemicals and a wheel, and a kiln. And we set up a studio. We built wheels by hand from wood kits. We built tables. We built everything. So the kids learned how to set up a studio as well as make pots. They were great. And then I did a one-room schoolhouse in Floyd County. It was the last one in the state at the time. They're making face masks there. I'm taking too much time. During this time when I was teaching as an artist in the schools and making pots in the summers, I was obsessed kind of with pattern. I've always enjoyed pattern and texture, and imagery has always been really important to me. I'm surprised I didn't become a textile artist. But these are some images of some works that I was showing and selling at that point. I had a few exhibitions. This is a little out of order, but the very first one-person show I ever had is this one here in the middle. In 1981, Appalachian Farside offered me a one-person show. And I was so excited. It was the first time. I was so young. You know, I was like 22 or something, and I was really excited. So I came down here and set up the show and stayed the night in the Boone Tavern, and that was like really my treat to myself. So that was a big deal. And I have that piece right here. I've kept it because it's kind of a signature piece. It was the very first one I ever carved on the inside like this. So I thought I'd bring that for you to see. The show on the right is when I started working in white. This is Cincinnati, and that's Columbus. After I worked for the Arts Council, I joined another potter friend of mine in Cincinnati. I lived in Covington, and she had a pottery in Cincinnati called Still Point Pottery. Those two images on the right are the showroom. We wanted it to kind of look like somebody's house, you know, so you could see what pots fit in a living situation. And that's a terrible picture of me and then some of my pots here. Oh, it's that tricky guy. When I was in Cincinnati, the Crone, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Crone Conservatory. It's a small glass conservatory in the park there in Cincinnati. And it was a really harsh winter, and I was depressed, and I was like, I need flowers. So I went to the Crone, and they had a show with calla lilies, and this entire room was calla lilies. They were as big as dinner plates. I'd never seen calla lilies like that. So for 2 weeks, I went there and I drew. I filled 2 sketchbooks of calla lily drawings, and they ended up in my pots. I started out with just doing the white, and the top 2 pieces, I'll point this one and that one, they're not glazed. They're just sanded in the raw form, so they're really smooth with no throwing marks, and then just biscuit fired. And they're huge. They're the biggest pots I probably have ever made. That one, right, this guy here, my photographer bought it from me, and it's like this big around. They were really large. I can't remember how many pounds of clay it was. And then I started doing these bowls because bowls are like my favorite form. And the reason they are is because there's nothing hidden. They're open, they're welcoming. If you've got a gooby in the clay, you see it. You know, it's right there for everybody to see. And you can't, it's probably the most honest form in the pottery world, I think. So I love them. And I had a second cousin who asked me to design some flower arranging containers for her. She said, I'm so sick of flower vases that are open and round, and your flowers, you put them in there and they flop all around and they look horrible. And you have to have a ton of flowers to make a good arrangement. So I started making these with the slits in them. I take an oval, a cylinder, and just push it into an oval at the top, and then I made these cuts. And you pull a stem of flowers right into the cut, and that does the arranging for you. So that's how the flower, the cuts and the curls and all that stuff got into vertical forms from bowls at that point. And then I decided I like bowls so much I'm going to put them together. And at first I just did doubles. And then I got the idea of, like, if I had a double, you know, I could have this third guy and he could be separate, but when you shove it over against this thing, this little lip hooks over and locks into the rim. So they're kind of like together, but that little third guy, this little guy, he's kind of independent, and I kind of like that idea. So I did a whole series like that. And then I thought, well, hell, I might as well just put them all together. And I started doing these 3 ones. And I only probably got 6 of those finished through a fire. Because porcelain, I'll talk about it a little later, but porcelain is 1/3 silica, which is sand. And when you melt sand, you get glass. So porcelain, when it's fired, is 1/3 glass. And it moves when it's in temperatures and kind of slumps around. So a lot of times I would get cracks in these little areas here where I would join them. So I made a lot of them, but only about a dozen or half a dozen came out. And I don't even have any of them. They all sold. This is Gwen doing retail fairs. Went all around the country. This one here in the middle is actually a guild fair. You might recognize that little tent the guild used to have. And an indoor show, and then this is Ann Arbor over here. It was the best show I'd ever done. I sold out on the 3rd day. And it was a 7-day show, so I sat there and didn't have any pots to sell, and I felt like an idiot, you know. Oh, I wish I'd made more, you know. I started adding color to the white line that I did, and this is a shot of my glaze pantry. These are all mason stains. They come out kind of the color that you see, which is unusual in ceramics. Usually copper carbonate is kind of a gray-green, and it can be like vibrant green and teal, but it doesn't look that way in the raw form, so it's really hard. These mason stains, they figured out a way to make them look very similar to the colors they make. So the first time I added color, I just added 2 colors, coral and teal. I don't know, I went to Florida that year, I guess I got influenced. I don't know, I did a bunch of Florida shows, and I thought, oh, they'll like these colors, it's Florida. So anyway, it was really interesting because I had done this one show in Columbus, Ohio, Winter Fair. I'd done it for a long time. And I added color, and people would come in my booth and say, wow, I've never seen you at Winter Fair before, you knew? And I'd be going like, well, yeah, I've done it for about 10 years, and you just didn't see white, you know, because the pieces were all white prior to that. So I learned that I'll hit more audience and make more sales with color, so I switched over to color. This is my rig. I had a Toyota truck and a topper, and my dad went together with me. He knew a horse trailer manufacturer, little business in my hometown in Ohio, and they cut the horse trailer down, made it short so that the wind, you know, when you're going 80 miles an hour down the freeway, it doesn't hit that and throw you off. And this is a shot of me down in Florida somewhere, I don't know. And then this is my studio and what a line of production wear looked like. The year that I was doing this work over here on the right, it was all centered around tea and kitchen caddies, tea caddies, cups and saucers, coffee jars, teapots. And that's just the raw work. It hasn't been glazed there, lined up on the shelves. These are what my booths look like. After I got a little more sophisticated, the one on the left is the last one I had. I basically took my trailer because I needed a room to haul hollow core doors. I hinged hollow core doors together and basically built a room. It had crown molding on it to hold it together. And this little thing here I stood behind, it has shelves in it, so I had my money box and tissue paper and wrapping and sacks and all the stuff you need when you sell pots. And this was one over here. It was a near disaster. I was going to the Baltimore show and American Craft Council show. They called me a week before the show and said, we've given you a 15-foot booth. And I went, what? You know, my setup was 10 by 10. Oh yeah, we've got extra room and we're going to give you, I said, I don't know if I can do a 15-foot booth. He says, well, it's either that or nothing. And I was like, okay. So I went out and I bought more hollow core doors, and I still had room. I didn't have enough doors, so I had to make this little curtain here, which was to go behind the booth. And my carpet wasn't big enough, so I got my grandma's carpet up off the floor upstairs in my house and used it. And it worked. It was a good show. This is my wholesale catalog. When I was doing all white, it was really handy because black and white photography worked because the pots were white and it was cheaper to print. And I had this little guy here. It fit in an envelope, a business envelope. I've got one here, a sample, so you can see. Show and tell. It opens up like this, has little flaps, and in here are the things I'm marketing. There's an artist statement and then cards that show the work. Well, and I decided I don't want to sell bowls anymore. I just take that card out. If I'm going to do something else, I put a new one in. If I change something else, I just take it out and I just print an extra one or a new one. And it worked really well for a number of years for me. I didn't have to reprint ever. And here's another shot of what the, look at these. Crystal, look at these. Look at these wholesale prices. $10 for a dessert plate. Oh boy, I was cheap. The galleries in California love to buy my stuff because they could triple and quadruple the price, the wholesale price, and still sell it in California and LA. So they were always buying from me. This is a couple of different production lines. This was the very first one I did. Again, I was talking about, had pattern on some of those images you saw earlier. This was an iris calligraphy pattern. It looks really heavy-handed to me now, but it was popular because it was blue, you know, blue and white. Then I got the idea to do slip trailing, which was another way to draw, only using the liquid clay. And I have an example of it here. You can look at these pots afterwards. This is from a dinnerware set. You can pass it around if you want. It's just some colorant added to the clay, and then I put it in a syringe and draw it on the pot, and it's raised off the surface. And it's a really nice way to draw. Well, and then I got the other brilliant idea to use these colors, which, what do they remind you of? Fiesta Ware. Yeah, you know, I should have just shot myself in the head. I would like to be blue, 2 yellow, and 1 coral. And there was so many different variations of so many colors in every order that I just about lost it. I will never do that again. That was the year I hired a packer to do my shipping. And then this is the white line over here on the right. After a while, you know, you do your work for a while, people hear about you. And so I was asked to do a lot of teaching. I still do a little bit of it. This is at Center College here. Aramont and John C. Campbell, these are 2 craft schools in the southeast part of our country. That if you're not aware of them, you might want to look them up. They're wonderful. John C. Campbell is my favorite. Isn't me over here with my little class? This was cool. This guy was a preacher from Hawaii. This guy was an ex-CEO from Chrysler. Which one is she? No, where is she? That lady right there. She invented Scotch tape at 3M in Minneapolis. Oh, I mean, it was a class like, I mean, these are the kind of people I got when I taught down there. They were all so incredibly cool people. I wanted to just stop teaching and find out about them because they're so neat. These are some of the books I've been published in. The very first one I ever got in was this one, Contemporary Porcelain. I think it was, I don't remember what year, 1996 maybe, quite a while ago. But it was an international book, and they were clay artists from all over the world, and I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm in that book. And I got 2 photographs in there. And it was the white altered rim bowls, which were pretty unusual at the time. Nobody has done anything like them. This is the most recent one here. Kevin Hullock is a potter from Massachusetts, and what's nice about this book is he asked us to talk about the work, and he put our words in it. And Athena, if you are interested in any of these clay books, I have duplicates. And I'm not going to need more than 1 to pass on to my single child. So if you have any interest in books and some publications, let me know. I'd be glad to donate them.
Thank you.
And then these are some articles in magazines. I just chose this one, Service Monthly. This is a piece I made about 15 years ago. I had this little, oh, dang it. Go ahead. Had this little urchin, sea urchin, shell on next to my wheel for years, and decided to try to mimic it in clay. And I did, and it was a hit. That piece is, I did a whole line of them. If those of you who knew my gallery, you might have remembered I did a show of them, and I had bowls that had a swath of this pattern like going around the side, and you know, vessels and teapots and all kinds of stuff. It was really time consuming because every single one of these little, you can't see it, these little dots right in here were done with a Bic pen. You know, the very point of a Bic pen, just pushed into the clay. It made a little hole, and then it made a little circle around it, which was the base of the plastic that held It's amazing what you can make with impressions. This piece here was also published quite a bit. This is a finial made out of a polymer clay bead. When I had the gallery, I haven't gotten to that, but I gave bead shows, international bead shows, and the pattern on that bead is the pattern that's carved into the clay pot. And I did a number of these, using the bead as the actual handle on it. So that was kind of cool. Oh, dang, got heavy-handed. Then I moved to Irvine, got married to a guy who lived there, and he built me a studio. There's 2 shots of it. This piece, this here is the gallery. There's that little carpet again. This is my sales gallery. It's the very first room you walk in when you come in the studio. And this is the door you come in, and you drive right up to. And this is a little, some of you may have come to this. I did a porcelain and perennial sale every year to get rid of my seconds and to thin my borders, which in the next slide you'll see why I have to thin my borders, because I went absolutely crazy when I moved there. I was like, land! I can plant flowers! And I went crazy. So anyway, that's some shots of the studio. This is inside. This is these pots here, a couple of them I brought in. They're pots I either have been published and I've kept, or they're pots that I teach with. When I'm teaching somebody how to make pots, I don't want them to see just my cups, or just the bowls that I make, or just the kind of things I do. And I've collected, potters are the worst. We collect each other's works. We love clay, so, I'm always buying other people's pots, or we trade. It shows a lot. So these are pots that I've gathered. These are jars on this shelf. These are cups on this shelf. So that when people come to the studio, or when they are taking a class, I'll haul them in like I've done today, and give them examples of other different kinds of potters, how they approach that form, so they get more than just from me. I think that's so important. This is the very first wheel I had. I built as a kick wheel. It's now just a tabletop. That's my wedging table, and on the other side is my electric wheel, which you can't see. Here's a shot in winter. What you can't tell exactly from this shot is from here, everything goes downhill. And this is my borders, and this is our house at the bottom of the hill. It's at the bottom of the hill because that's where the cave was that had the spring and had our water source. So that's why it's down there, and I have to trudge up the hill to get in my studio. That's right, gets me away. Carving started to become something that I did a lot more of. This is the very first piece I ever carved completely in the round. It was for an exhibit out at my alumni at my college. And then I started, again, doing these beads forms, and a lot of times I would carve to match the surface and the curve of the pot. And the same with this one here, it's a little vertical leaf. Now this one, a gallery in Northampton, Massachusetts, went with Celestial Seasonings, the tea company, and had a contest. And they asked potters to make cups that had related to Celestial Seasonings. So I did one, you can't read it, but it says Celestial Holiday. And there's a little bird with bells hanging in his mouth, and a little ribbon. And there's stars all around on the saucer. And this little lady, on the handle, there's this little notch. And her legs, they're hollow, and she fits right on top of that little notch. And then I hung a tea bag off her hand. She's putting the tea bag in there. So that one got in the show. This is the process of carving, which this is what I'm doing now, because I work full-time at the Artisan Center, and I don't have as much time to make pots. And when you make a pot, you only have so much time to trim it, finish it, and get it ready before it dries out. I learned that I could take a pot like this one I brought in. It was completely bone dry, and I could still carve on it. And so, 3 weeks, 3 months later, I can still come back to this form and work on it. So that's why I'm continuing to do the carving, because it's something it works into my life right now to make pots. This is the piece that got donated last year, this year, to the Arts Council's fundraiser in the silent auction. The theme was the 60s, and I started out trying to do Neil Armstrong and then Martin Luther King, and I thought, well, what if it doesn't look like Martin Luther King? What if he looks like a goober, or what if you can't tell it's on the moon, So I thought, what else is 60s? And I thought, Paisley. So I went and I looked up a bunch of clothing, dress patterns, fabric patterns from the 60s. And of course, Paisley was one of them. So this one has leaves up here. These were taken directly from patterns I found on the internet. And I just, drew them and traced them onto the pot. So these are leaves. This is, I don't know what that is, acanthus or cotton. It's just really cool looking. It looked Egyptian. This is Paisley. This isn't finished, just sort of start carving. And this is the back side of that same pot. And at the top here is a really wild Paisley pattern, and there's just some arches, and then this is a rose down there from wallpaper I found. And this is the tile you see out in the exhibit. This is it in process, along with another tile. It's got 4 calling birds on it. I'm working on a series for the 12 Days of Christmas. 4 calling birds. So, anyway, this one, yeah, 2 turtle doves, right, exactly, that's where it came from. I made a mold of the 2 turtle doves, so that's why I was able to glaze that one. This is a picture of what it looks like. This is the top of a little box. And I just draw an image on with a pencil, which I've done here and I'll show you, and then I just start cutting away. And the way to make it look 3-dimensional, I should have brought a piece of paper to draw on so I could show you, but you start with the area that's closest to you and then cut back as gradually from there. And you don't cut any deeper for each layer. You don't, if you go too deep, you go through the pot. So it's kind of an illusion, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. These are some finished works. I wish I'd never let go of that little blue peep. I had loved that one. It was very small. It was like for a kid. And again, this one I didn't bring in. Probably should have. It's one of my favorites. It's paddled. This was the first time I started paddling forms, so I had a flat surface to draw on and to carve on. It's really hard to carve on a round, you know, and get everything kind of going right. So I thought, well, just paddle one side of it flat, and then you've got like a canvas. And that's what you can see on this pot here. I don't know if you can see from a distance, but it's got a paddled area, a flattened area, and then I scrape it, and that's the area that is my frame or my canvas that I draw on. And, you know, what I put on there depends on what it's for, what I'm looking at the time. Again, here's another teapot with a bead. And this, then I wanted to, you know, bowls. I got one. I like bowls so much. I wanted to carve the inside of bowls. Well, it's really hard to carve the inside of a curved surface with your hand and make lines go straight and all that. So I remembered that the Koreans in the Yi Dynasty, which I don't know the dates, made these molds. And these molds were carved, and then they laid a piece of clay over the mold, paddled it, and it took up the image. This one here is carved down into the surface. In other words, the carving is down in. This one here and this one here, the carving is up and the background is low. So you take a piece of clay, like here, you lay it over this guy here, paddle it, and when it's stiff enough, you take it off, put it on the wheel, put a coil of clay there, add water, throw a nice foot ring, and you've got a finished piece. And you can do it over and over and over and over again. It was a way for me to get a little bit more production oriented with carved work. Here's one of the molds. We'll pass them around. This one was carved on John C. Campbell. It was broken, and I was so crestfallen I actually glued it back together. I still use it. It's been biscuit fired, and you can see that the images are down in the clay. And this is one that blew up in the kiln, the back side of it. But it's that mold. Hasn't been it's just been biscuit fired. So you can see when you pass them around, that's how it works.
What does that mean, biscuit firing?
Oh, biscuit firing, yeah, sorry. And most potters or most ceramic people fire their pots twice. And the first one goes to about 1,000?
I say 1,800.
1,800, 1,200, 1,800. It's like yellowy orange heat. If you look at a fire, you know, you see the colors in the fire. That's the first firing, and what that does is it dries the water out of the clay and it changes it chemically. So you can't take a biscuit fired piece, smash it up, and make something out of it again. But before you fire it, if you bust it up and add water, you've got clay again. So it changes it chemically, it's not able to go back to what it was before. And then the second firing is when you apply a glaze, and that goes about twice as high. For porcelain, it has to be at least 2350. That's the kind of heat that it takes to make steel. If you look in the kiln, you can't look in with your eyeballs or you'll burn your retinas. It's got to be, it's a white heat, really, really hot. These are my tools here. I brought them in so you can look at them. And I think it was 92, Teresa Deaver Cole and Linda Fifield approached me to start a gallery here in town. I'd been doing wholesaling and I'd lost track of my public. you take orders at a show, and then you go home and you make them, and you ship them out, and you never see anybody again. And it's great, because you get paid for everything you make. You don't go to a show and not sell anything and not make any money. You actually know that everything you make is sold. But I kind of miss people, so this idea of a gallery, that kind of intrigued me. And, you know, I love Berea, so yeah, another reason to go to Berea, so that's great. For 3 weeks, we built and constructed all these pedestals, walls, all kinds of stuff, and opened up an old town. And after 2 years, Linda got less interested, and I bought them both out. We actually were an LLC, we had stock, so I bought their stock and I was sole proprietor after 2 years. One of the things I loved about the gallery was curating exhibits. I started doing shows 3 times a year when the craft fairs were held, so there were people in town to come and see it. And I started showing work that I was interested in. Beads. I've been a campfire girl, you know, when I was little. I love beads. So we did a beadwork show. It was incredibly successful. I advertised these shows nationally so people knew about them. And what started happening was, I can't remember what's next, but anyway, other venues, galleries, or organizations started coming to Berea to see my shows. And they were so excited about them. They said, well, are you going to travel this show? I said, oh, I never thought about that, you know. The first one was called Women of Iron. I studied it, I taught at John C. Campbell Folk School. And as a result of teaching there, they give you, as part of your salary, when you teach at John C. Campbell, it's in North Carolina, you get a free class. It's brilliant because they invest in their instructors that way. Well, I went and took a blacksmithing class, and I was the only woman in the class, and I got to think, well, where the hell's the women blacksmiths? Are there any women blacksmiths? And I started figuring out that there were some really cool blacksmiths all over. So I did a blacksmith show. The Ohio Craft Museum saw it, wanted me to travel it to them. So I did. Then the American Blacksmith Association was having a conference in Asheville. They said, hey, can you bring it down there? So it ended up in the Asheville Art Museum. It's kind of like the Speed Museum. It was like the museum in Asheville. So that sort of started happening, and I really enjoyed doing that. One of the shows that did it was a couple clay shows. In the gallery, I always had a workspace and a throwing space, and I taught classes. Nancy was one of my students sitting here in the front row. It was a result of needing to make pots. You know, if I'm holding the gallery down, and it's January, and there's nothing happening, you know, I need to be making pots. So January, February is when I taught, and when I made pots in the studio the most, but I made pots all the time. And these were 2 crazy pieces. My friend Maxine Keller, who bought the gallery after I started working at the Artisan Center, she has both, I think she has both, no, she has the one on the right. This one's sold. I had gone to, I'd never done this, I'd gone to a fashion show. And the women were like throwing, you know, walking that walk, man, they just, I really admire them. They are incredible what they can do on that walkway. So I was like, God, man, those dresses were so cool. So I decided I had to make some pots that showed dresses. And these were really large. They're about this tall. And the spouts, I made a mold so I could do more than one without figuring out how to do it again and again and again. Also in the gallery, we did a show called Collaborations. I worked with Bobby Craig, and I worked with a painter, and I worked with a printmaker, Laura Lee Cundiff, who lives in Versailles. In this piece, Laura drew 3 elephants on it. I brought this piece in, and the top of the pot are the tops of the elephants. Here's the one you're looking at, and on this side there's a guy that looks like he's getting ready to charge you with his ears forward. Where's the third one? That guy, he's just kind of, I see a butt. Yeah. So, this came as a result of this black, it's basically 6 minerals and a little bit of flux. And she used it as almost like a glaze on her pots. And I loved how it looked, because, you know, white, black, oh, I could get into that, you know. So I sprayed this whole thing black, because I thought a white elephant, you know, that's a bad idea. White elephants, you know. So, anyway, and then I thought, well, maybe if I scraped it, and so it ended up being very skin-like. It's kind of heavy. So Laura Lee drew the elephants, and then I finished it. And then I started, as a result of drawing with the slip again, that's kind of full circle. That's what I did as an undergraduate. It's the same technique. So this one is a really bad storm, and this is a tiny little house down there trying to survive the lightning. And this one, I did this outrageous curl on the rim, and I thought, God, you know, what does that look like? What kind of animal can I put on that? And I thought, horns. So that's how that one came about. These are some of the shows I curated. I got ahead of myself talking about it. And this is one of the ones, this clay wood fire salt. Wood fire pottery is a real labor-intensive way of firing pottery. You basically throw wood in a firebox, and that's what heats the kiln. It takes hours and hours of stoking. Some people do it for 7 to 10 days, nonstop. They have crews, different shifts. It's crazy. But it was just starting to really take hold. This was 2001, and I did a show here in my gallery, 40 artists. I asked people from all over the country, they didn't know me, but they just really liked the idea of a wood fire show. And lo and behold, everybody asked, said, yeah, I put pots in. Some of these people were like, really famous. I had them on pedestals. I, really admire their work. So the second year I did it, I had 80 artists, because I started finding more and more wood fire artists, and I was kind of greedy. I couldn't hardly stop inviting people. So they all said yes, so we had 80. And it went to the Ohio Craft Museum, and it traveled to the Southern Highland Craft Guild. And they designed that beautiful card. This catalog here is one I did. You might recognize some people. This is Rudy Asolnik. Brian Boggs doesn't live here anymore, but this is his chair. He had a studio here for many years. This is Money, Twyla and Lottie Money, who live just down the road. They have work at the center. And I was asked to do a show about Appalachia. And boy, that's tough. How do you do that? So I thought about all the states that go along the Appalachian spine. There's 11 of them. And I chose somebody from each state in all different mediums. Some people I just knew their work through someone else who knew their work. Some of it I just researched, and some of the people I went and saw them, visited them and met them to make sure they were really who they were, kind of thing. And then as a result, I did this catalog. And I interviewed all of them, and there's a picture of their work or them, and then their story. And so it's called Tell Me a Story. It's a great little show. I wish it was still traveling. This is the most recent one I did. Once again, the Ohio Craft Museum said, I need you, we have a space, would you like to curate a show? What do you want to do? And I said, I've always wanted to do a show of figurative clay, human figure. Because I knew I couldn't do that at the Artisan Center, being a state agency, we can't have nudes. That would be just too uncool, I guess. So anyway, I went around and thought about all my favorite people who ever did anything in clay that were figurative, and I invited them all. Once again, I asked them questions, and we did a catalog with their stories. This is the show card. This is Calvin Ma. He's from California. He was relatively unheard of at that point. Now he's in all the top galleries around the country. I just recently checked in on him. And these are two pictures from that show. This is Claudia Goldberg. She's from Connecticut, and this piece is about this high, and it looks like a real person. It's just incredible, and it's made out of porcelain. This is not my favorite piece in the show, but one of them that I had a good image of, and that's Adrienne Arleo. I visited her. She's from Montana. She does incredible work. If you really want to see some really cool art in clay that's figurative, just remember her name. I'll tell it to you later if you want to write it down. Adrienne Arleo, A-R-L-E-O. She's killer, absolutely killer, the stuff she does. She's a really neat lady. Oh, in 2008, I got the Rudy Asolnik Award, which is kind of a big deal. That was exciting. Anyway, and here's here's that sea urchin.
Who gets that award?
Yes, every slide I've had questions. So,
Oh.
tell us about that award.
Well, they don't
gives
give it anymore, but
Who gave it?
the Kentucky Arts Council and the Kentucky Museum of Art and Craft, which is based in Louisville. They went together, and because the governor's awards were always just for sort of artists, they wanted something for craftsmen. So they named it after Rudy because he was probably the most internationally known artist from our state. And he, this is one of his wooden bowls turnings, and they etched that. I should have brought it. They etched it on an oval piece of thick glass and put it on a little base. And then the base just says, Asolnik Award, 2008, Gwen Heffner, It's just really minimal, but you get this look at this sort of holographic etching of Rudy's piece on it. And I don't even remember who nominated me, but it's for your body of work, your impact on your field, and your outreach, basically. I guess. I think that's what it is. I really don't.
That all sounds good.
Yeah. Oh well, it was quite an honor. This is again these crazy urchin pieces. So I wanted to have these bigger so you could see them, and also this teapot. Still kicking myself that I sold it. But and here you can see those are the little big pin, stick it in there kind of goobies, which are the same thing that's right here on the urchin. You can't see it very well. I should have brought the urchin. Here's my shop and my home. I just painted my new sign this year. Put a new sign up. These are the new colors I painted my studio. I don't think I have a shot of that. And you come in, you see this sign, and this is the post that you're looking at right here. And the lane comes in, goes down to the house, and this one goes up to the shops. My husband has a wood turning shop as well.
Where is this?
Outside of Irvin, in the boondocks, almost to Lee County. You follow 851 out of Irvin, wind up the ridge, and we're on a ridge overlooking the Kentucky River. It's quite a lovely location. There's a horseshoe bend of the river right by our mailbox.
And you're open, is that gallery ever open for people?
It's open all the time.
Really?
And I have a honesty policy. I've got a jar there, and if you buy a pot, you just put your money there.
Great.
It's got a little receipt book.
And do people stop and buy?
Not very often, but now that you can read my sign, I'm going to get more, I know. Yeah, people do. Well, the thing that was so tricky was because I'm always here. I'm always at the Artisan Center, you know, like 9 to 5. And it's an hour to get home, so, you know, I'm not home that much. But I am on the weekends now. We've got our schedule arranged, so that's why I'm here today. These are some of my borders and pots on the shelf from a couple weeks ago. Oh. And this is the most recent stuff I've been doing. This is Bill Witt. He lives in Waco on College Hill Road, and he has a wonderful new wood fire kiln, or soda kiln, that was just recently built. I've been firing with him. This is what it looks like before we lock the door on it to fire. This little guy here, we have little baskets we made to pull out during the firing to see how much soda was settling down on the pots. This thing here is, if you've ever seen a fruit sprayer, it's that canister that you go, makes pressure, and then you spray your fruit trees with bug spray and stuff. Well, we use it with soda water, soda ash water, and we spray in these ports here, we spray in this port here, and there's one on the opposite side, and then sometimes in the spy holes, which you open up to see what's going on in the kiln and then shut it. And we pull these little guys out, and after they are cool enough you can look at them and handle them, you can see if how much soda's gotten on the pots. And then this is the top of the kiln right here after the firing. And you can see sort of here it's kind of a little sort of orange peel feeling texture. That's what soda and salt does. What happens is sodium chloride is salt, right? The chlorine goes up the stack as a gas, and the sodium settles on the pots as a liquid vapor and makes those little pebbly kind of glazed surface. Now, early American pots, before they knew how to make glazes, early people, early Germans in particular, they salt fired everything. And the salt surface was what glazed it so that the pots weren't porous so you could eat out of them. Yeah.
So they've always sprayed it like that?
No, that's just this, you know, that's the technology of clay. That's how advanced we are. I'm laughing at myself.
No, how do they, I mean,
Well,
I've
we
known
used to-
salt kills before.
Lots of different ways to do it. Some people just threw the salt in. You can wrap it in a little piece of newspaper, and the newspaper bursts into flame immediately and it's gone. And then the salt explodes immediately and goes all over the kiln. And the kiln has drafts, which is what makes the heat flow through them and through the shelves and everything. That's why there's this much space around everything. Well, so they don't stick together, but also so the stuff can get in there and cover the glaze, cover the pots. But it's a wonderful way of firing. And this is the piece that went, and this one is out in the show. And this one's out. I think that's out in the show. It's a carved piece, like you hear.
So when you pull these pieces out like that, do they break?
No,
Wow.
The test pieces,
yeah.
they don't break.
I've never had one blow up on me.
Do you put them back in?
No, you just leave them there.
Wow.
You put several in there, so that in the early stages you see what's happening, and then as the firing goes further along, you know whether to add more salt or if it's getting to temperature. What happens when you throw the salt in is it slows the kiln down. Like this thing over here, see, that's our pyrometers. At the bottom of the kiln, the top of the kiln. And it says, usually it says like 21 or 2300. You throw the salt or the soda in, and all of a sudden it drops like 500 degrees. It's like amazing. It's like cools it down really quick.
Yeah.
Because that's in the flame, sort of cooling it down because it's a liquid. It's a gas kind of liquid. Little droplets. This is one of the first pots I ever cut the rim to, and what I brought it along for is for you to hold up with your fingers on the inside and see how translucent it is. porcelain, when it's thin enough, light passes through it, so it becomes very much like glass. And I don't know how we're doing time-wise. That's pretty much the end of my show. I don't know, the next slide is just that Gwen Heffner porcelain thing. So I'll leave this one up. I do have a couple of things here. I don't know whether to pass them around or have you come up. This is, I was telling Athena, this is a wood block from David Stevenson when his father, President John Stevenson, went over to meet the Dalai Lama. David couldn't go in on the audience, so he wandered around the neighborhood, and there were all these wonderful prayer flags. And he got a hold of a wooden block that was cut, like a wood cut. And they used this, they ink it, and they would press it on the fabric and make prayer flags. When he brought it to me, and we made a bunch of prints off of it, I'm supposed to have given it back to him, and I need to at some point. I pressed clay into this and made a mold. And when I press clay into this, again, it turns out looking like this because of that reverse process. Now there's 4 tiles in the exhibit in the library here, and they're all from this block. So I thought it'd be cool for you to see how that transition happened. And again, it's something I can do over and over and over again. Repeat. Here's a little card piece. Here's a little bowl. It's got a bunch of junk in the bottom of it. I think it's why it hasn't sold yet. Some gooby from the kiln. And here's a card piece. I thought you might want to feel the surfaces of the card. I also have some things here to hand out, if you would like them. I'll leave them up here and let you take them if you want. This is a catalog I did for a show for the Southern Highland Craft Guild. It was held here at Appalachian Farside. No, where was it held? At the Berea Arts Council, when it was up on the College Square. And it was a show that honored Southern Highland Guild members who'd been in the organization 25 years. And there are a number of Berea and Kentucky people in it that you will know. Again, it's one of those catalogs I put together where I interviewed people, told their story. Churchill Weavers is in here, Berea College is in here, Jerry and Joyce Cooper, Rudy Solnick, and one other, I can't remember. But they're all Berea people. And I thought, I have a whole bunch of these. You know, we printed, Copyright Printing up in Richmond printed these for us. And you're welcome to take them. They're kind of a good read. And then you can throw them away if you want. But they're not doing me any good in my studio. And I also have some cards from a show I did at Appalachian Farside. It's got that teapot on your lip. Welcome to have that as well. I have a couple of tiles I made last night out of clay. And I brought a whole bunch of stamps. And I thought it would be fun for you guys to make something. I mean, how do you talk about clay and then not get in it? You know, I mean, it's like, duh. So I had to bring some. So anyway, these are 2 little tiles. And I bought a bunch of stamps, and I thought it would be fun for you guys to come up here and press a stamp in the clay and see what it does. All these stamps are ones I made, and they're all different, but I've got one little test thing that shows you what they look like when they're glazed. So you might want to look at this and then look for that stamp. I hope I brought the right stamps. I haven't made them. I make them all the time. But that'll give you an idea of what it looks like. And one more thing before I have you can jump out of your seats and be free. I've got some tools up here. I wanted to get you dirty. So here's a piece of porcelain. And I thought it would be fun for you to, it's kind of cold, for you to kind of squeeze on it and see what it feels like. And take your thumb and go like that. It's real smooth. There's no gritty stuff in it. Porcelain is made up of white china clay. That's clay that broke down right where the feldspar rock was formed and never washed anywhere and picked up any minerals or colorants of any kind. It just stayed where the parent rock was. So it's white and pure. And there's some in Florida, Georgia, and most of the best comes from China. England has some wonderful porcelain clay too. But it's white kaolin, white porcelain clay, kaolin it's called, silica, which is sand, and the parent rock of clay called feldspar, which is both, gives it bones and also a melting flux, allows it to melt together. So all those ingredients bond when they're fired. So I thought it would be fun for you to muck on the porcelain. And,
so you're describing the parents of clay. That sounds so.
Yeah. Well, the parent rock is feldspar for all kaolins, and they're found all over the world. But the very first porcelain was ever made in China. That's where pétuns, this is what it's called in China, they call it pétuns. It was the very first white kaolin they ever came across. And of course they went crazy because it was like, ah, the great white canvas, you know. And of course the Chinese really perfected. Actually, they perfected it because they stole the Koreans and made them slaves, and they were the best potters. I shouldn't say that, but they were. And they ensnared them and made them come over, and they learned a lot. Japan learned a lot. I should say this is Japanese. Japan took the Koreans over. The Chinese were ahead of everybody. But it's harder to work with. And when you throw it on the wheel, I work with my clay a lot stiffer than most potters. Most potters, their clays are like really mushy, and mine is like stiff. They go, how do you throw this? And it's like, well, if you're going to throw porcelain, you got to throw it stiff. And I use less water. I hardly use any water compared to some people. When I watch you throw crystal, I'm like, she keeps adding water. And I'm like, oh, my porcelain will be mushed by the time because her clay will stand it, you know. It has a lot of different, it's got different bones to
It's
it.
like hardened kale pectate.
Yeah, it is kind of, pectate is got a lot of kaolin in it.
That's what
Yeah,
I
good one. I've never heard that one. That's good. That's great.
Write that down. You can use it.
Do you have any other questions? Because what I'm going to do next is, if you're interested, I'm going to carve on this piece here and show you how that low relief carving works. It's a little messy, so I'll get a little clay dust on the floor, Athena, I'm afraid. And on me, of course, I wore black today. What was I thinking? And the other thing that's up here is everything you want to know about Gwen, but you didn't want to ask. And this is a book I've put together throughout my career of shows I've been in, shows I've curated, everything. It's all right here. If you want to find something out about me and then tease me about it later, that's where to find it. Well, the last thing I'm going to hand out is this. Again, same thing, all you want to know about me and less. This was a retrospective show I did at my gallery. I can't remember what year. And it has, there you go, it has an artist statement. It has my history, more than you want to know. It has a poem. Actually, this poem really inspired me. It's by a friend of mine, Carolyn Weitzel. So if you take anything from this little piece of this pamphlet, this poem is quite
I'll touch this.
It's good for all creative people. So, and then on the back here is kind of a little biography like you just saw, of where I started and where I was with that urchin teapot you saw.
So your family was into music, you were drawing, why clay?
Oh,
Why not become a painter?
well, when I was going to be a vet. When I went to Luther, that's what my degree was going to be in. And I had this real asshole. I'm sorry. The guy who's supposed to be advising you, advisor. And I wanted to do something with drawing with my degree. And he poo-pooed me so terrible and said, well, if you're interested in technical drawing or illustration, go to the bottom drawer there. And I was so mad at him, I was wanting to quit college. And the choir I was in had just got invited to go to Romania. And my parents said, you can't quit, you've only done 2 years. You need to stay in, go to Romania, take that choir tour, and just tough it out. So I switched degrees. I took a painting course that spring, and all the art people saying, what are you doing? Where have you been? You know, kind of thing. And I stuck with clay because I was the worst one in my class. The school I went to, Luther, had like I told you, the teacher who taught there was a student of Marguerite Wildenhain. They had 40 of those kick wheels you saw in my studio. It was a huge studio for them. This was in the 70s, late 70s. And it was amazing, you know, it was a huge program. Well, the very first day of class, the teacher happened to point to me and say, get on the wheel, we'll show them how it's done. Well, the wheel had an area on the end that you wedged your clay on. You sat on this, you wedged here, you sat here, you put your pots here, and there was a little box with your water in it there. Well, I got on the wrong side of the wheel, and the whole class laughed at me. That was my ominous beginning. I was the worst one. You had to pass the teacher's critique to go to the next thing. The first thing we made was a dog dish. You know, dog dish. It's a little flat thing with little sides that go like that. And when you got good enough with that, you got to make a bowl. When you got good enough with that, you made a cylinder. And then a plate. And there were steps. And, you know, I was like, I didn't think I was ever going to get off the dog dish. You know, it was like, oh, God, I'm going to be making dog dishes all semester. It was like the worst. And a friend of mine came in one night, saw me struggling, and realized what I was doing wrong. I was holding my hands totally wrong. I was putting pressure on the wrong place. It was tearing up. So that person became my roommate. And we made pots for many years together. But like I said, I had both printmaking and clay. My thesis show had equal parts. I had that apprenticeship with that printmaker out in Arizona, and I was just too chicken to go. Yeah.
Are you still friends with that person that sort of got you going and showed you how to put
Yeah,
Jane
Reckonoff, she's in California.
Do you send her pottery?
No, but we write every Christmas. She's a very established potter in California, Southern California. And she does the American Craft Council shows occasionally out there. She's carving her work now too, so we talk about that. She was always so much better than any of us. She was better than our teacher. She was phenomenal. Yeah, her pots are always better than his. It was amazing. I mean, I can say that now. Couldn't say that during the time. But I guess I would just, the pottery thing turned out in Minneapolis, and I went that direction. It was like the road not taken. But I am doing, like I was telling you guys, I am doing wood engraving now. I've been doing that for 12 years. And that's a relief print thing. I do at least 1 or 2 a year. It takes 3 days to do a wood engraving properly. On a little block about 3 inches by 4 inches.
Well, we can't wait to have you back talking about that.
Thanks. Do you have any questions at all about anything? Do you want to come out and stand?
What made you decide to go to Artisans? I mean, you have this career going on here, and then you're going to do a 9 to 5 kind of, I know it's more than 9 to 5, but.
The reason I went for the job at the Artisan Center was because when you run your own business, as most of you might know, you clean the toilets, you wash the front windows, you advertise, you pay the bills, you sweep the floor, you do the arrangement, you do everything. And you have employees, you got to do taxes, you got to do corporate, I had to do corporate taxes, because we were a corporation. All that stuff, I didn't like that part of it. I mean, I liked doing the curating of the shows, and I liked displaying the work, and I liked advertising. I really liked the PR angle. And my graphic design skills always came in handy, because I designed all of our ads and all of our flyers. So I thought, well, I'd be stupid to not at least apply to that job, because it had curating, programming, which was working with artists, the weekly demonstrations that we have out there, and PR, programming, and curating. And it didn't have any financials. It didn't have any maintenance of a building. So it had all the parts of my gallery job I liked, and none of the parts that I kind of didn't care for as much. And I was ready for a change. I had the gallery for 9 years. I had a buyer who wanted to buy the gallery. So it kind of all fell into place. Yeah. And I really, if I love something, I can sell anything if I like it. I mean, I've been selling most of my life. Since I was in, college, I worked at Sears and sold stuff.
They need you back.
Yeah. So, it's just easy. If I don't like something, man, I can't sell it. I mean, I can't tell you if something's great if I think it sucks. I mean, I really just can't. But I never had work in the gallery I didn't like. I didn't carry artists whose work I didn't believe in. And if you believe in it and you're compassionate about it, people pick up on that, and they know that it has value. So that's always been, I don't know where I got that gift, but I think it comes from having mentors who believed in me, and my parents who's, were behind me when I was waitressing and making pots to kind of make, I didn't do it right immediately. Like a lot of my friends who did undergraduate work went out and set up potteries, and after 3 or 4 years, none of them were making pots anymore. They failed. They didn't know enough. I got out of graduate school. I knew I still didn't know enough. And I think part of that was I was kind of chicken. To set up a studio, I wasn't ready to settle in Louisville. And I love the city, but I didn't want to live there and have a pottery there. So I kind of put off setting up a studio, did the Artisan School thing, saved money. I was able to save a lot of money for 3 years at the Artisan Arts Council's job. I can't remember what it paid, but I didn't need much. I had a Volkswagen. $5 did me for a week. So I was always careful to really know what I was doing and make sure I had the nuts and bolts, and I didn't ever jump out on a limb too much. And I think that's what allowed me to sustain my career. And always looking for new directions. I mean, I didn't make the same pots ever. You see how many times I changed my wholesale line because people wanted new stuff. So I guess, I rambled, sorry.
Thank you, Gwen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oops. Sorry. Oh, okay.
In the future.
Oh, I see. And then I take and I go down into the bottom of that groove. And I lower it.
Yeah, that's right. Now, next thing is something's coming with
I think so.
No, yeah.
I'm having a hard time.
Yeah.
There, got the right angle now. So it looks like this is raised over that, right? So for this one, do the same thing. I make a line, and then I make this a little bit more blended. So it looks like it goes right into that one. Once again, chop down into the very bottom. I'm chopping down into the bottom of this groove here. It looks like I'm
So that
obliterating.
one goes underneath it.
Yeah, it looks like I'm obliterating the pedal below, but I'm not really.
That sounds great. I can't wait.
It makes a funny sound, doesn't it? The same thing here. So it looks like really, this is not the tool I use all the time at home. The tool I use at home is an old paring knife. Was my great. I'm getting it all over you. Was my great grandmother's. Now, if you look at this, it looks like this is above this, and they're really not that. It's just the change of plane that I'm doing this little bit right here. That makes that. And see the shadow of that angle. And then this one. I'm gonna make this one.
That would be a great loan shop. Just doing it.
I've taught this at the John C. Campbell Folk School, and what I did was I brought dry pieces, dry tiles, and wet things, and I let them work. They had to bring drawings that would fit on a 6-inch tile. And then
So you can do that when it's leather hard too?
this is completely bone dry. You can do
Yeah.
it leather hard too. What's different about leather hard stage, now see how this looks like it's on the same plane?